One note we should mention: this episode may handle very sensitive topics about loss, grief, and death. Listen to it with your own risk. Thank you.
To know my husband, Bill Weiners, to know that he was not only a very, very kind and wonderful individual, but he was really an inspiring person and even a transformational figure certainly for me, but I know for other people also in our Department of Neurology where he was chair.
That she is a nice person, caring, kind, and I love her most of all. It's overwhelming. So your anger is focused on yourself, your family, your doctors. So you just got mad and say, "Why did she die? You're the reason she died." You just scream like and say, "You're the reason she died," and sometimes you say, "You're the reason she died."
Hi, it's Asma, and this is from Different Perspective, the podcast where I talk about things I can't get out of my head. And specifically, this episode is one of these topics that I couldn't get out of my head. I felt very unsure about this topic specifically because it's talking about very sensitive emotion that I unfortunately have never been able to experience. I don't know if I should say unfortunately or fortunately, but grief is a very important part of our lives. A person who dealt with grief might be a more intelligent than a person who did not. And I'm so sorry for saying that. But a person who dealt with grief may have a very more advanced experience in life and dealing with more complicated emotion than a normal person did not. But that's not what I want to talk about here. In today's episode, I wanted to make a very appropriate introduction because I wanted to let you know, guys, that I think I said it and I'm gonna say it again, that I felt very unsure about making this episode specifically because I have never been able to experience the emotion that of grief and loss. So I felt I have no right to make an episode about grief and loss, and I've never experienced it, but I've been very interested in this topic, and I've been very interested in the complicated emotion that a person who have dealt with it is wise and more intelligent than a person who does not. So I would like to apologize for anything that I'm going to say in this episode that, if by any chance, make you feel offended. And I would like to let you guys know that even though I have never been able to experience loss and grief, I have reached out for some of my friends who dealt with grief and experienced it, and I've asked them a plenty of questions that I'm going to add in this episode that y'all are gonna hear them speaking. So that's what I wanted to tell. That's first. And second, I have a very, very exciting news. Now, officially, from Different Perspective, are going to stream every Monday evening. So y'all don't have to wait every 3 weeks for an episode now. Officially, again, you can listen to From Different Perspective every Monday evening. And thank you so much for listening to this very boring introduction. And let's get started.
The main thing, I guess, is that I thought it was going to be all about sorrow, but that wasn't what it was. It was all about really feeling like you woke up into a completely new world, that you not only didn't know yourself, but what your life was about, where you were going, what you were going to plan to do.
What is grief? A question that you might have asked yourself a plenty of time if you've ever experienced grief, or you may not. But what is grief? The only definition that might feel appropriate to define grief as is loss. Even though loss is not a definition, it's a synonym. But we know that grief has a bunch of different synonyms, and the only synonym that I felt pretty much can describe what grief feels like is loss. Loss of a loved ones, loss of a partner, loss of a parent, loss of a sibling, loss of a grandparent, or even a loss of a stranger or enemy. Okay? Because I've asked one of my friends a while ago about why a person feels as if they're going crazy about a person's loss. And she told me that when a person dies, this person may have been covering a big part of the other person's life. It could be a partner, as I just said, it could be a grandparent, it could be a parent, it could be a sibling, it could be a stranger, and it could be enemy. And one of the most funniest things that she said through my interview with her, she said that it could even be an enemy. Because this person, when this person dies, this person is going to leave a empty space for the hate that this person have been feeling for them. So it's a very difficult emotion and complicated emotion to describe and experience and talk about. But I believe that I've made a very good research about it, and I feel I'm pretty much ready to talk about it for 40 minutes long straight. So, now that we defined grief, what and how does grief affect in our daily lives?
People's response to grief is distress, right? I mean, this is generally a truly awful thing that has happened. But what I like to think of is most of us have an inner resilience that we are able over enough time and with the support of loved ones and taking other ways of understanding what's happening to us, most of us do adapt over time and integrate the fact that this person has lived and meant something to us and is gone. We integrate that into our lives.
When grief happens, it actually affects us in very different aspects. Physically, mentally, emotionally, and so more. But in this episode, I'm only going to cover the emotional and physical and neurological aspects of it, as that's pretty obvious in the title. And why the neurological aspects? Because during my research of this topic specifically, I've believed that I've run into a lot of professors and a lot of authors and writers who have talked about the neurological aspect of grief and how does it affect our brain. And I felt very intrigued about this topic, and I felt like it's a very important part that I should definitely add to the episode. So, the physical aspects. How does grief affect us physically? Well, I've wrote a bunch of, let me grab my book. I wrote a bunch of aspects or affection, I don't think that's the right word, things that might happen and you might experience physically when you experience grief. You might experience insomnia. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it, insomnia, which is the difficulty of sleep. I believe that's it.
How grief impacts sleep. Grief can lead to a state of hyperarousal where the body is in a constant state of alertness and you cannot relax enough to sleep. Also, when the stress hormone cortisol is high, it can interfere with the natural sleep-wake cycle and make it difficult to fall asleep. In addition to high cortisol levels, grief may also lead to other physical symptoms that disrupt sleep, such as headaches, muscle tension and stomach problems.
And then you have the increase and decrease in appetite.
A common physical symptom of grief is appetite changes, which can include loss of appetite or increased appetite. Now, grief can alter the body's production of hormones that regulate appetite and metabolism. As you know, grief can lead to an increase in the production of the hormone cortisol. This can stimulate appetite and lead to overeating. Grief can also increase activity of the hypothalamus, a brain region that plays a role in appetite regulation. So when the activity of the hypothalamus is increased, this can lead to overeating. In addition to changes in appetite, grief may also lead to other physical symptoms that can affect your ability to eat, such as nausea, stomach problems, or changes in taste or smell. Now, these physical symptoms can make it difficult to eat or enjoy food, leading to appetite loss. This is why a lot of people lose weight when they're grieving.
and you have difficulty in breathing, a lack of energy, feeling very tired and weak, oversensitivity, oversensitivity to noise, tightness or heaviness in your chest or throat, a hollow feeling in your stomach, dry mouth, etc. And I've researched pretty much more in the physical aspects of grief, but I didn't really find much because all of them was somehow referring to the neurological aspects. So for the physical aspect outside of the brain, it was very, very little. And a person may experience a lot more that I've just listed, but I think it's very little, and at the same time, very much to just include all of them in this episode. So I would like to move on right away to the emotional aspects.
I came to embrace the idea that these things impact us in very, very similar ways. I did not know that these periods of dissociation were even occurring for a long time, because dissociation is defined as detachment from reality. It's not loss of reality, you're not psychotic, but instead you're detached from reality.
I have not written down anything for the emotional aspects of grief because I wanted to talk about it freely and I did not want it to be limited to a script. So, the idea of grief came to me one day while I was praying. So I was praying and I suddenly started thinking, which if y'all didn't know, if you're a Muslim, you should not be thinking while praying, okay? That's not a good thing. You should be focusing on Allah when you're praying, so don't think. I'm really stupid of doing this, of saying this, but I should say it. I am currently in a kind of a complicated state of my grandmother being very sick. And the actual events and actions that are happening in my life right now, of all my parents, all my relatives, all my family being very busy with my grandmother being sick, and y'all should pray for her. I really hope she'll get better. But those events and actions that's happening in my life did actually affected me somehow. It made me really think of what and why does grief feel so bad, and it hurts so much just thinking of it. And I actually started imagining my life without a specific loved ones, and I cried. That's basically what I just imagined. Okay, I just started imagining. I sat down in a completely silent room and I started imagining how does it feel to lose a loved ones. And I've had a specific person in mind. Mind you, I've had a specific person in mind. And I started imagining this whole new scenario of me waking up, doing my daily basis working and stuff, going to school, doing basic things. And I felt like, how does that affect my daily life? Losing this specific loved one. And I started crying. I started tearing so badly. And I was like, is that how does it really feels? Losing a loved one, just imagining it make me feel suffer so badly. But how does it feel to actually lose this person?
So I was actually having an exam, science exam, I guess.
I remember.
And my aunt come up to me and she said that our grandmother died. And I said, there's no way. There's no way she could die. And when I see everybody crying, and then I believe that she's really gone and died. And I didn't need to see her body.
To actually not being able to feel them again, physically and emotionally and spiritually, I don't think, but not being able to communicate with this person the same again, and not being able to share your happy moments and sad moments and intriguing moments with this person anymore. This person is completely getting out of your life and never coming back, and the feeling really hurted. and it make my heart ache so badly. And that was the first time that I've experienced how does it feel to cry unintentionally.
Whenever I am sick, I'll just go to her home. She'll feed me. She'll give me everything. Yeah, and I'll stay with her till I come.
I've never been I've never understood how people say that I started tearing, and I did not knew that I was tearing, and they like touch their cheeks and it's sweat dropping with tears. Because how a person not understand that they are tearing up, but when I experienced it, imagining it, it felt very, very real. It felt like as if I was actually losing this person, and it felt very, very heavy on my heart and mind. And I actually had to take a break for a while that day. Like the entire day, I was taking a break just from the imagining of it. I just imagine how does it actually feel losing it. That might drive me insane. That might drive me actually insane.
And so what happens then when our brain is trying to make sense of the idea that this person isn't coming back, which feels quite foreign, the brain is all set up on prediction, and it has been predicting that that person will be there day after day after day. So as the brain is trying to make sense of this idea that they may not be coming back as you're adjusting, for a long time, it seems that we're still getting a signal in the brain that says, when I think about my loved one, I feel not pleasure, but reward, in the sense of I feel like I want to do this again and again. I want to think about them. I want to look for them. I want to bring out things that remind me of them. And over time, of course, eventually the brain works out, when I bring out photographs of them, it doesn't really mean they're coming back. I can still enjoy the pictures, but it doesn't predict that I will get to be with them again.
And while I was researching about this topic, I've kind of hit a realization that what grief feels like after I started imagining it and actually thinking of this person in my mind actually dying. I've wrote down, grief feels like as if it's a constant running situation where you don't have time to get your breath. You're constantly running away from your feeling and the feeling of emptiness and the realization that this person is not here with you anymore. So you choose to avoid it and run from it until it slows down. But it never will unless you face it and let yourself heal. And that realization hit first when I saw a video of a man. I hope I find the video. If I find the video, I'm going to insert it. Of a man saying that.
You've probably heard of the stages of grief, and they kind of map on to the things I'm talking about. But the important thing to remember is there's no beginning, middle, and end to grief. It's not a linear process. You can bounce around all these different emotions, all these stages, and it looks more like a soup of stuff.
Grief is not a linear emotion and experience. It does not have start, middle, and an end. It's kind of a very wavy experience where it's suddenly very up and suddenly very down, and maybe sometimes in the middle, and maybe sometimes it's just a linear line. Where sometimes you suddenly feel the urge to cry and scream and break things when you remember the loss of this person that you loved. And sometimes it's just a very hollow, a very emptiness in the heart, that the denial feeling that this person is not with you anymore. And sometimes it's just a situation where you just tear in silence, just crying in silence for a reason that you might not even know. You're just crying. You just believe in something. You are tearing, and you know that you're tearing, but you don't know why you are tearing. And it's just a constant cycle, a very complicated and confusing feeling.
You can have, just like you could have depression and anxiety, you could have depression and complicated grief, or PTSD and complicated grief. So we are able to tell the difference. They don't always go together, but of course they can go together.
In the neurological aspects of grief, in this this specific part of the episode. It's going to be a lot of science information. And mind you, I'm not a scientist. I am very, very, very bad in biology, physics, science, whatever it could be. But I would like to tell you about some professors, other writers, neurologists who talked briefly about this topic of how does grief affects our brain function and body working. So, for example, you have Dr. Lisa M. Shulman. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. Let's say Dr. Lisa. Dr. Lisa, she's a neurologist. I cannot pronounce it. She's a neurologist and also an author and a professor in the University of Maryland. And she is the writer of the book Before and After Loss, a neurologist's perspective on loss, grief in our brain, where she talked briefly about her lovely relationship with her husband before and after his death.
To know my husband, Bill Weiners, to know that he was not only a very, very kind and wonderful individual, but he was really an inspiring person and even a transformational figure certainly for me, but I know for other people also in our Department of Neurology where he was chair. Frankly, it just really upended my life when he was gone because we not only were married, but we had this professional relationship too. So it was just an all-encompassing kind of thing. You know, when somebody's really ill and he died of cancer, you know, you don't have the time to figure out what it's going to be like when it all comes to an end, even when you realize that they're dying. And, you know, I just sort of figured that because I am a neurologist, I deal with people with serious illness, and for goodness sakes, I counsel other people who are dealing with serious problems and loss. You know, I thought, well, I probably know more than the average person, and I'll get through this.
I haven't been able to get the chance to read the book because I'm currently in a very difficult situation where I'm trying to balance my social podcast life and my school life. And I have an exam actually coming next week, so y'all should pray for me. So I haven't been able to read the book. Okay, and I would like to read it in the future, but I will read you some of the quotes that people said it was very awesome, and it inspired me pretty much to write more about this topic. So, Dr. Lisa M. Shulman says, and I quote, "Grieving is a protective process. It's an evolutionary adaptation to help us survive in the face of emotional trauma." What you all think about this quote? I really would like to hear your perspective about this book specifically, and if anyone ever had had the chance to read this book, I would like if you could write me a very short summary about the book because I don't have time to read anymore. I'm very busy lately, as it seems to be. But the book is very awesome, and I've had the chance to listen to a couple of the other Dr. Lisa speaking and talking about the neurologistic aspects of grief and what it does to our brain. And you can find all of those videos actually on YouTube. They are pretty much free and easy to access. So if you would like to listen to her talking, it would be very awesome, and you would get a very emotional listening to her own experience in loss, grief. So yeah. Also, pretty much another author who have talked about grief brain and the neurologistic aspects of grief is Dr. Frances Mary O'Connor. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, because I'm very bad with names. The author of the book The Grieving Brain and the Surprising Science of How We Learn from Love Loss. The book combines the storytelling, accessible science, and practical knowledge that will help us understand better about the grieving brain.
Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor is a psychologist at the University of Arizona. She studies the physiological correlates of the wide range of emotional responses during bereavement. She has investigated the failure to adapt following the death of a loved one, termed complicated grief, and the neurobiological, immune, and autonomic parameters that vary between individual grief responses.
There is a bunch and a lot of quotes about this book that I've pretty much liked so far. I can't say that I've liked the quotes of this book more than I like Dr. Lisa's more, but I love both. They are very amazing women. And also, Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor also do have a lot of podcast episodes with other podcasters, amazing people she interviewed it. They interviewed her, not she. And you can find them all on YouTube. It's pretty easy, accessible, and very, very, very emotional to listen to. And it's very intriguing, a very interesting topic to listen to. So, for examples, a lot of the quotes of this book says, I have this website that is open to me right now, but let me read it up to you. Says, grief is not a problem to be solved, but a journey to be taken. Another quote says that the brain is wired for resilience, but it needs to be exercised. Another quote says, the most important thing we can do for a grieving person is simply to be present and listen. Another quote says, while grief never truly goes away, it does change over time, and it's possible to find meaning and joy in life again. See? You really should read this book. It's very, very wholesome and very great book. So, I've seen this article from the American Brain Foundation.org website. They say, and I quote, they can cause changes in memory, behavior, sleep, and body function, affecting the immune system as well as the heart. It can also lead to cognitive effects such as brain fog. So, grief is a very complicated topic. And I believe it is a very complicated topic. And it feels very hard to deal with grief. And by imagining how does it feel to lose a loved ones, for me, it made me tear up and cry, and it just ruined my whole entire mood for the day, and for the week, and for the month probably. But how does it actually feel to lose this person? To actually lose it and not just imagining it? Because somehow, every person in this world has a job to do. And this is one of my friends' sayings, not mine. She says, and I quote, that every person in this world have a very specific job that they have to do since they were born until the time of their death. So this person is doing their job and making a very, pretty much a good community, and being able to communicate with other people in their lives. So when they leave, the other people that they used to communicate with now is losing. They're feeling empty because of the space that this person has left. So you might see a partner has a very dear part of the other person's heart. So imagine losing them. Imagine not being able to share with them all the happy moments and all the intriguing moments that you've ever had in your life, and then just in a day and a night, in a blink of an eye, you're not able to see them, you're not able to touch them, you're not being physically and emotionally there with them. How much it would affect us, and how much it would affect our brain, how much it would affect our heart. Because I've actually saw this article talking about the actual heartbreak. Like, we heard pretty much a lot of people saying that, oh my god, my heart broke, and that shit. But when a person dies and the other person is grieving, there's this disorder that's called the broken heart.
Was finding out that this phenomenon we sometimes call the broken heart phenomenon, where when someone loses a loved one, their own risk for mortality or for developing a disease or a disorder goes way up.
And it has a scientific name, but I can't pronounce it, I'm sorry. but it's a disorder called the broken heart, and it's a temporary. It does not last very long, but it does not really last very short. And it feels like your heart is not pumping enough blood to the muscles of your heart. I believe that's it. I'm sorry if I'm saying something wrong or describing it in a wrong way, but people actually have a broken heart disorder when a person dies. And people are not like, this person is unable to enjoy their life, this person anymore. But also, losing a person, losing loved ones may seem as if the life and the whole entire world stops right there. But it's not. I believe that I know how does it feels, and I believe though I've never experienced it, but I believe it's a very painful experience to go through. But with time and resilience and patience, it might feel like the best thing that might have ever happened to your life. Because even though I might have never been able to experience how grief and loss feels like, but I've experienced distance. And my father, the person that I love most in this world, is not with me right now and right here. And I've been away from him for almost a decade now. And I feel it. I know how much does it hurt to not be able to experience all these moments and all these happy, these little cute moments with him. And every time I remember him, I feel so guilty for no reason. I start blaming myself, and I feel so sad for not being able to make all, like, I'm just thinking of all these years that we've been apart and all those memories that we could have made through this whole time that we were with each other. But even though, again, I might have never been able to experience grief, but I believe it's a very beautiful experience to go through. It might be painful, yeah, it might be very, very hurting. It might be feel like your heart and your body and your brain is aching so badly for this person, but the process, the journey of moving on, the journey of accepting that this person is now in a better place than this world is very beautiful and very wholesome and very, very painful. So, y'all, I'm just wanting you to know one thing. Keep fighting. Keep proving the entire world wrong. That even though it might really hurt grieving over a person, but it's a very, very powerful emotion and a very powerful journey, path, and experience to go through. And as I just said, and I will say again, a person who had grieved, and a person who had lost a loved one and have gone through this whole entire journey of moving on is more intelligent and more advanced in life than a person who did not. So, if you are grieving or trying to move on, I'm just letting you know that you are more intelligent and more life advanced than me. Okay? That's honor. That's an honor for you. Okay? So, yeah. Stay safe. And I love you all. And I'll see you on Monday. Thanks.